Cornbread, I would say, is the staff of life in the Appalachian Mountains. My name is Tipper Pressley, and I've lived in Brasstown all my life.
My name is Logan. I was born and raised in Brasstown, North Carolina. Mama's food connects people.
Familial culture is, but the things that you like, your kids like, and your grandkids they eat. So there's the cornbread, just keeps being passed down. Even though today we're living a very different lifestyle than that, where we don't have to depend on, making sure we grow corn on every inch of our land so we have enough to make it through the winter. It's still, that love of cornbread still here. My favorite memory with cornbread would be sitting at my mother and father's table. Daddy'd come in from work, Mama had supper on the table, me and Paul and Steve, whatever we'd been doing, whether it was school or even when we were older and maybe had jobs or whatever, and us sitting together, and a common meal would be cornbread, soup beans, pinto beans, maybe kraut with weenies. In the summer, maybe fried squash and some corn straight from the garden, cucumbers and onions and tomatoes, but the cornbread just wraps all that together perfectly. I'm very happy with my life today. I wouldn't take anything for it. I'm very, very blessed. But there's part of me that would just love to go back one time, back in time and sit at our table with just Paul and Steve and my mother and father, I make cornbread very similar to my mother and my father. Slight differences maybe in the amounts of this or that. And then we all heat our pan, believed in heating the cast iron before you actually put the batter in. But my daddy would put it on top of the stove. He would heat his on top of the stove. And he would actually heat like lard or whatever in it, so that was grease in it, but then he'd pour some of that into his batter. So I do mine different. I put my pan, I grease it and put it in the oven, and then I don't pour part of it out. I do that separate. Then, maybe I can get to the sides so you can see. The secret is that, what you hear right there. Getting it hot. Gives you a wonderful crust. My video about cornbread is one of the most popular on my YouTube channel. Probably the gist of most of the comments are they're happy to know how to make it, maybe like their grandmother or their mother. Now there's lots of people sharing their method, like lots of people love buttermilk. I don't use buttermilk, and lots of people use buttermilk. So
I'm amazed that Tipper don't use buttermilk. Buttermilk has a tendency to make it moist, or just regular milk or water, it'll dry out. By the time it cools down, it's about dried out, But buttermilk, my recipe is a teaspoonful of salt, and usually 2 teaspoonfuls of baking powder. And a lot of times I'll chop up little jalapeno peppers and put in mine just to give it a little flavor. And then I use all buttermilk. My wife she'll use maybe a cup and then add water with the rest of it, but hers is not as moist. Mine stays moist. Cornbread's bad to dry out after 2 or 3 hours. But if you do it right, it's still good and moist. And that's what makes cornbread moist. It was a necessity back when I grew up.
Especially in the old times, back in the day, as we would say, they just depended on corn was their primary source of food. It fed their animals and them. It fed both of them. But the easiest way to preserve for the corn was dried, but they let it dry on the stalk. And it was a different, like my husband and I grow corn, we grow sweet corn. It's not a corn that you would dry and make cornbread out of. We just eat it fresh. But in those days, they grew lots of corn and they dried it so they could eat it, and their family, and their animals that fed their family in various ways, they could eat it too. You can't eat a dried kernel of corn, that's no good, so then you had to figure out how to use it, so they ground it. And pretty much every community had a grist mill. Some of them had more than one.
They gave the meal to the folk school, and the folk school, it was sitting over there, and they didn't even know it was there. And I found out about it in 2000, probably about 2012. It took us about 2 years to restock all that. And me and Joe Miller and some other fellas in the community that knows more about it than we did, we restocked it and got it back in good shape. And we brought it in here and hooked it up. So we grind corn all 2 or 3 times a year. The tradition's been carried out pretty good. When we have bread, it's cornbread, you know. But there's some people that still do it. They done it because their mama showed them how to do it. But now the third generation, their cornbread is Jiffy Lube. Ain't that what it's called? Jiffy, is it lube? No, ain't lube. Jiffy Mix. Jiffy Lube's oil, ain't it?
Cornbread I grew up with was like the Jiffy Mix that you stick in the thing, and yeah, it was like always somewhat sweet and it was cakey. I'm Bonnie Lenneman and we're currently in Murphy, North Carolina. I'm still very much like a guest in this culture and in this region. Folks take a lot of pride in where they're from. That is intact more than it was like where I grew up. I also grew up in an agricultural community in Michigan. Some of the ways that I think Appalachian foodways are distinct from other parts of the country. Again, like really specific recipes and folks being like really attached to and really proud of like their family's way of doing things. And I see, you know, admittedly some wariness of like, that is not how we do things around here. You did not cook that correctly. And I think that's cool and I think it's really special. You know, when I get excited about cornbread and my own practice, I think it's an opportunity for creativity and expression and to incorporate also other grains. The recipe that I got originally is from a woman who calls herself Miss Wondersmith. She calls this goldenrod cornbread to celebrate harvest season and to spell melancholy. This cornbread, I just got so excited about it. So she uses fresh goldenrod flours, cornmeal, and her recipe calls for rice flour and tapioca flour as kind of the binder. And I have a lot of food allergies myself, so I substitute. There's also turmeric in the cornbread. It's this beautiful, like golden yellow color. So this version that I'm going to share with y'all actually has it's wild rice flour from wild rice that I harvested in Minnesota. So this is the cornbread I made this morning. This was the goldenrod and turmeric cornbread. The person I think most of when I think about cornbread is a woman named Peggy Patrick. For a long time, could just drop by the house, made like, Peggy would often have cornbread available or just like whip some up. And so that was kind of like a staple to like, okay, here's Peggy, here's the cornbread. And that was like one of her ways of welcoming folks into her home.
I have a great story. My friend just down the road, her daddy said, now he grew up in a family like of 16 kids or something, huge family. And lots of times all they had was cornbread. That's all they had to eat maybe. And they were really lucky and fortunate if they had like syrup, we would say syrup, sorghum syrup to put on it, or maybe honey if they had bees, you know, or had found a honey tree or whatever. And then later in his life, of course, better times come along. He owned a business in Murphy, successful and all that. But when he wanted something really comforting, he wanted cornbread and honey, just like what he had when, you know, he was basically living day to day, not knowing if there's enough food to feed everybody. He wanted that. You know, he didn't want steak or whatever. You know, it become home, I guess, to him.
Food connects people. Because when Thanksgiving comes or Christmas comes, oh, Granny's cornbread or Granny's sliced taters, you know, cooked just right, half fried and half stewed. And in my opinion, that brings back the connection of what people really like to have, but they don't have time to get around to doing it, you know. You need to slow this world down a little bit. Population in Clay County, we've gained about 2,000 people in the last 10 years.
There are a lot of folks moving here. A lot of folks moving here. And like working retail every day, somebody comes in like, I just moved here from Florida. I just bought a house. And I think that like people are kind of like, oh my gosh, this region's so cool. The natural beauty is amazing, and people are excited about the culture and also like want to come in and change the culture to what they want it to be. A lot of folks who are interested in preserving the foodways, maybe not necessarily being from here. I think there can be some romanticization, like, oh wow, Appalachian is like this like region that has things intact. I'm gonna come and learn about that, which, as you know, has some pros and cons to that. I also know a lot of young people, including like, you know, teens, who are really excited to continue their family's food traditions, and that's really encouraging and inspiring to me.
I think the future of Appalachia, I don't know that I could say like in 50 years, but in the immediate future, I think it's very bright. I think it's, you know, there's like and this has been not just in Appalachia, I'm sure, but across the United States, especially since COVID, like a reawakening of people wanting to get back to their roots, get back to more of a simpler time. Maybe that familial culture, you know, get back to where they're close with their family members, and you know, thinking about the things. Making a garden is a huge part of Appalachia, so then thinking about growing your food and knowing where it comes from, and, you know, knowing what's on it, and then being able to fix it yourself. So I think the future for Appalachia is really bright. Got butter, and got Matt to get us some pepper jelly. It's ready to make.